Hey, Kate, what did you eat last night?
I made bucatini with tomato pesto.
Cute! Bucatini!
I know. The bucatini is the pasta that you and I got at Monteverde right before the world ended.
Kate! So funny. It's true.
Rick was here visiting in Chicago the weekend before lockdown, basically. And so all of my most recent food experiences were with Rick. He was the last person I was like in a restaurant with. So we went with some friends to this great Italian restaurant called Monteverde in Chicago. Stephanie Gruenberg, I believe, is the head chef
good.
who is known. Yeah, I'm impressed that I pulled that out because I hadn't planned on saying her name. Known as the Pasta Queen, and she's been on the top chef shows and stuff, and I really like her, and her pasta is really great. So we bought this bucatini from them to take home, and it turns out it's not. They didn't make it. No. It's dried pasta from Italy, but whatever. And bucatini is like a thick spaghetti with a hole in the middle. And what I can tell you is I used half of it for this. This was not the best recipe to use with it because I realized the whole point of it having a hole in the middle is that it would allow it to absorb a liquidy sauce in the middle of it. And the sauce that I used with it was fairly dry, so it wasted its nature, if you will.
Yes,
it was still
totally.
Terrific. It was still excellent, but I realized that next time I'll use the rest of that bucatini with something else, because I made half of it with this recipe and ate it for the week. And anyway, there's this cookbook that I used to be obsessed with and that I gave as gifts to everyone I knew, which means Rick has a copy, and many of you listening, if you're listening, have copies, called Quick Vegetarian Pleasures by Jean Lemlin, and there's a recipe in there called capellini with tomato pesto.
I love that you still remember her name.
I do. I talked about it so much for so long. It's green. It's neon green, and it's a great cookbook. And in grad school, a bunch of us got it, and we cooked for each other from it. And it was also, I think I connected with cooking for friends and with friends for the first time in that way. And I guess I did it at college. It wasn't the first time. But anyway, and it's tomato paste. It's a simple pesto with tomato paste, raw. The pesto is uncooked. A can of raw tomato paste, which seems weird to me. Yes. Yeah. And raw garlic. And probably some chili flakes, I'm guessing, and a whole bunch of fresh basil and parsley.
Wow.
And olive oil and Parmesan cheese and pine nuts. And then you put in a little pasta water, and it makes it liquidy, and you toss it, and it, as Jean Lemlin says in the thing, the pesto clings doggedly to the pasta. So it's meant to be... I know. I always think that's really charming. So it's meant to be capellini, which is super, super thin pasta, and it is definitely better with that, but mine was still delicious.
And again, the simpleness of that recipe and all of those flavors coming together to create something really wonderful. I'm always struck that by no matter what amazing things we have or we've tried, whenever that stuff comes up, it just is so good to remember how effective it is.
Absolutely. And the great recipes are the ones where the whole is so much better than the sum of its parts. Where it's just so much better than it sort of has a right to be.
Wow. Totally.
Yeah. So it was fun. So that's what I had. What did you make?
Kate, I made my first mushroom nut loaf. I know,
Nut
right?
loaf.
Nut loaf. Yeah, because I've been wanting, I'm always interested in these things you make at home that are just solid. They just feel very hearty dishes and, not quinoa or a salad or like what people might consider bird food. But it was super simple. I spent a lot of time. Just like looking at different recipes. So you have to bear with me. My notes are a little bananas because I sort of wrote it down after the fact about what I think I did, but it was really good. So it was basically onion in butter, super easy, we know, threw a little bit of garlic in, and then a bunch of chopped mushrooms. I did shiitake, and I did baby portobello mushrooms. And then once that cooks for a little bit,
don't those have another name? Is that cremini?
Yes,
is that the same thing as the baby portobellos?
Yeah.
I'm just testing my own mushroom knowledge as you're talking, that's all.
You would think I would know that from... being the king of mushrooms on this podcast, Kate.
Yeah, you certainly are the king of mushrooms. All right, sorry to interrupt. So you're on mushrooms.
And then I added thyme, marjoram, basil, tarragon, sage. And you throw...
Fresh or dry?
The thyme was fresh, the basil was fresh, the sage was fresh, the tarragon and the marjoram were dry.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and most recipes say with this, they can all be dry. because I guess the nature of the way it cooks. And then you put all that in, let that cook for a little bit, a little red wine or sherry just to boil it off a little bit. And then I'm also cooking brown rice on the side, so I have a couple cups of brown rice going on, and then a couple cups of walnuts that are finely chopped into a food processor. And then I also did some cashews. And let's see. And then basically you mix it all together. You mix the rice, you mix the mushroom mixture, you put in 5 eggs, a cup of cottage cheese, and
Cottage cheese.
I know. And then this also said Parmesan, Gruyere, cheddar, fontina, or smoked. Really, whatever other type of cheese you want. So I did Parmesan because I had it. And then salt and pepper, and you basically put it in a loaf pan and let it cook for 35 minutes. Loaf pan with parchment paper, that is. You know, and one of these things I was just so darn proud of when it came out of the oven because it looked beautiful.
It was beautiful. I saw pictures.
And I just thought, you know, this is like a really great thing for anyone listening when you have a vegetarian over for Thanksgiving. What a great thing to present, and super flavorful, super hearty. It would mix really well with obviously any vegetables you have or any other sort of type of starch that you'd want to put with it. But God, I was in love with it.
And if I recall correctly, it didn't need a sauce, right? Because it sounds like it would need a sauce, but you said it didn't, right?
Agreed. And a lot of these came with sauces and gravies you could make. And I was just sort of exhausted at the time. So I thought, well, I'll try that next time. But I think because of the cheese, obviously, it held together really well. And I think, oh, you know what else I did? I didn't do all 5 eggs. I cut back on 1 or 2 of the eggs and I put in panko breadcrumbs. Just as another binder. And I have to say, when it came out, I still thought it was maybe a speck eggy for my taste. Oh. So just something to think about. Because when that said 5 eggs, I was like, that seems like a lot of egg.
That does seem like a lot of egg. And I know that you're iffy about eggs.
Yeah.
Sometimes. You have to be in the mood for eggs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like it. I like to know it's there, but I don't want to be overwhelmed by it. Sort of like, you know, family at holidays. Yeah.
The first time I encountered nut loaf, which... we really need to rename this item, but the first time I encountered it was just last year in London. Today I was going to be leaving for London tonight.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Tonight was the night.
I know, it's still in my calendar. I didn't remove all my travel stuff from my calendar for record keeping, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, you would have been there with your mama.
I would have, as we speak, been getting ready to go to the airport to head out to London tonight. So anyway, a year ago when I was on that trip to London, I went to a pub with Lisa Tiger and learned about nut loaf because in English pubs, they have a Sunday roast. And it's literally on Sundays, they have a lot of pubs do a roast, and you can get either roast beef, roast chicken, or there might be a third option. And like Yorkshire pudding and roasted potatoes and vegetables and gravy. And it's like a proper kind of English Sunday dinner. And it's a big pub thing. Yeah, totally. And a good Sunday roast, I love. And so the vegetarian option is nut loaf. And I'm like, what is this thing called nut loaf? And being a vegetarian, Lisa was like, oh, it's really great. She makes it all the time. So I had it, and it was, in fact, delicious. And like you said, it was really hearty and filling. And it really did replace meat in terms of the effect it has when you eat it in that way.
Yes, totally. Great way to say it.
Yeah, and it felt celebratory. There was something festive about it. A Sunday roast is a special meal. It's your Sunday dinner,
Totally.
You know? It's not just a burger.
For it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a roast something, and so it has that same feeling. So I am definitely a fan. I'm sure it had lots of mushrooms in it that were disguised, I imagine, because it didn't taste of mushrooms. So I loved it.
I was going to say, what you just reminded me of is when I took it out and let it cool and I cut it, I can't explain to you how satisfying it was to cut it, because it reminded me of like, oh, this is what it's like when you like cut the turkey. Like it just cuts and it's so it unfolds beautifully the way everything is sort of layered in between. Like it was such a satisfying thing to like prepare and serve myself.
Yeah, it looked like a meatloaf.
Yeah.
It reminded me very much of a dense meatloaf from the pictures.
Agreed.
So,
Perfect.
Which, again, has that satisfying quality.
Yeah.
Well, good job, Rick.
Thank you, Kate. Welcome to another episode of You Won't Believe What I Ate Last Night. I'm Rick.
And I'm Kate.
And this is our ongoing conversation about food, health, weight management, and our endeavor to be and stay healthy in a really tasty world.
with love, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves and others.
Season 5 of You Won't Believe What I Ate Last Night is brought to you by Smart Building Technologies, a leading provider of green technology at home and in the workplace. Find out more about Smart Building Technologies at smartbuildingtech.com. That's smartbuildingtech.com. Before we go any further, please take a moment, rate and review this podcast. Rate and review us. I know every week we do it. We're told. They always say, you got to say this every week. We're like, every week? And so now we do it every week. And it works because you guys do it.
Yes, every episode. So, Rick, would you say that you're somebody with a strong sweet tooth?
I would not. Well, you asked me that. I would not really say that initially. No, I would not say I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't say you are either. Nor am I, really. I mean, I love my sweets, certainly, but I choose savory over sweet almost any day if there's a choice.
Well, that's a good question, Kate, because that's what we're talking about today. Sweetener. And we're just going to throw our little thoughts in about Sweetener. And most importantly, we have an interview with Vicki Shanta-Retelny, who you guys know from the podcast, our wonderful, wonderful nutrition expert. So she's going to be by in just a few minutes to give us some thoughts on Sweetener. Kate, what sweeteners do you use?
Well, I've gone through a series of them over the years. I tend to use more natural sweeteners as opposed to artificial sweeteners, like agave and coconut palm sugar and honey and maple syrup, because I've always sort of felt like they're better than refined sugar for me. And while it's true that in some ways they are, the bottom line after having done the research is when it comes to blood sugar and weight, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. That natural sweeteners behave like sugar. So I think I, for a while, was sort of fooling myself into thinking that the low glycemic index in agave was better. And I don't know that that really is true. But those are the ones that I tend to use the most that I have in my pantry and that I will pull out and use. And molasses if I'm baking. How about you?
Pretty much similar. I use agave. You introduced me to agave many years ago. Honey and maple syrup. Those are the three main ones that I use. And I just very rarely feel like, well, I never used to use them very much, I think, in cooking but particularly that we started this podcast. And I was thinking about, that what you were just saying about, how they sort of function the same as sort of artificial sweeteners. So it really is this question of like, how do you stay healthy in a tasty world when it comes to these sweet things? And I guess I was thinking it really just comes down to moderation, doesn't it? That's all we really have available to us if we're going to be using them, is to be really cautious about how much you use it and when you use it. And you've obviously been asking yourself, do you need to use it, particularly in relation to if you're going to use it in a recipe and you're also going to be having something sweet for dessert. I think that's sort of something else, we probably need to stay a little bit more conscious of.
Right. And in our case, cocktails.
Oh, well, I don't drink a lot, Kate.
Oh, okay. Well, then in my case, in me and Janice's case.
All right, you're right. I got to pay attention to it in cocktails. Yeah.
So then there's the question of artificial sweeteners. So I think you and I, neither of us really buy those and use them at home.
Agreed.
I tend to find that they have a funky, bitter taste, a metallic bitter taste. A lot of them that I've tried, like I find that about stevia, and there's a couple of other ones. I don't think I've tried monk fruit, which maybe wouldn't have that. But I find some of them I don't like because they taste weird to me. But what I learned recently, there have been studies that show that some people have that response to artificial sweeteners like stevia, that they have that bitter taste.
Really? And
other people don't. And so certain products that have, like reduced calorie products that have that fake sweetener, when they do the testings and stuff, they find that there's a subset that's like, this is gross and bitter, and another subset that's like, it's great. And it turns out that maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like asparagus pea, maybe, or cilantro. Like some people hate cilantro and it tastes soapy. So I'm wondering if it's like that.
Interesting.
But apparently I carry whatever that is because I find them to be bitter.
Wow. All right. Yeah, I don't have much experience with those. Oh, and I always, I used to think, oh, I don't because I never used to drink coffee, but yeah, I don't ever really add them to anything. I was with my sister recently and we went to Starbucks, and Helen, I think maybe one of the only people that, I don't know, maybe has never been to Starbucks in her life before, but we were in the car and
How is that possible? She's traveled the world and she hasn't been to Starbucks. Not that you go to Starbucks in other places necessarily, but that's shocking. Anyway,
every time I want to go and get my chai tea, because that's all I really get from there, she's always like, what should I get? And then it always gets into this conversation about what she should get, and usually coffee related, but then I am of no help to her, and always trying to figure it out. If you don't know the menu, it's a challenge. But
yeah, tell her to text me next time.
Totally. Somehow we landed on, I went in and I asked the guy, told him the situation, and said, what would you recommend? So I think he did an Americano. I think that's right. A cafe Americano iced. Mm-hmm. And it didn't have any sugar. So I brought it out, and so I had to go back in and get sugar. So I said, can I just have a sugar for the coffee? So she hands me like 6 packets of sugar. And I'm like, well, who needs that? I almost gave them back. And of course I brought them to Helen, and she starts putting them in the car, and like one after the other, she just keeps adding them, because I don't realize, I think, how much sugar it takes to make something like that sort of maybe help reduce the effect of the bitterness, I guess, of the coffee. Is that what it balances out, perhaps?
Well, the challenge is that granulated sugar doesn't dissolve in iced coffee.
Oh, Helen, are you listening?
And so it sits at the bottom as grains. And maybe you can drink it up through your straw or something. But that is actually the one time I have been known to use. And my dad and I, when I was growing up, my dad was all about artificial sweeteners for a while before we realized how poisonous they were. And we definitely were an equal family, which is aspartame.
Equal.
Or the blue packets, and we had equal, because also I would put it on cereal, and there's other things that I would put it on other than coffee and stuff. Mm-hmm. So cereal's a big one for me. But in iced coffee, I have been known to put equal in iced coffee. I totally forgot about this, because it's such a fine powder that it dissolves.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
And so I'll use that in iced coffee. And God knows I love my aspartame in Diet Coke.
Right. Oh, yeah. When I succumb and do Diet Coke, that would be, which I'm grateful that I don't do as much anymore, that would be the one time I really inhale it, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. I used to love Tab with saccharin.
Tab! I remember, this is how far back my weight issues go. I remember being like 10, 11, 12, and I'd be coming back from whatever I was doing with my siblings after school, and it was usually hot, and maybe that was, I wouldn't run, but they'd run, or some dumb sport thing. I remember very clearly being in the car at the 7-Eleven, and them saying, do you want anything? I'd be like, yeah, a Tab. Get me a Tab. And aww. I remember thinking, in that car, I'm being super healthy, drinking a Tab after all of the sweating and working out.
Yeah.
How did they get Tab over on us?
I know, but I loved it.
It was great.
I loved it, and I loved my saccharin. Yeah. Saccharin apparently, Sweet and Low, which is saccharin, apparently chose those pink packets specifically so they would catch your eye in a sugar bowl.
Really?
And they would stand out against the white. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the irony is artificial sweeteners people use them to be healthier, but it doesn't necessarily work. So there was a multi-ethnic study of atherosclerosis that showed that daily consumption of diet drinks was associated with a 36% greater risk for metabolic syndrome and a 67% increased risk for type 2 diabetes, which is the whole reason that people are drinking them in the first place, is to avoid that. And I think one of the reasons, apparently, that they say it's so bad for you is that it's so sweet. Artificial sweeteners are so sweet. They're so much sweeter than natural sweeteners. And it can lead people to find less intensely sweet foods like fruit less appealing, and unsweet foods like vegetables downright unpalatable. So it's that whole hedonistic set point thing.
Right. Wow.
And get this. Saccharin, I have questions about what I'm about to tell you, but saccharin apparently is so addictive, and we've heard this before, addicting, I guess is the word, that studies of rats were offered either saccharin that they would take through the mouth or intravenous cocaine They routinely, for the most part, chose the saccharin.
Really?
So they say that saccharin is more addictive than cocaine. But what I want to know is, how does a rat understand the concept of choosing intravenous cocaine? But they must have I actually tried to track that down just because I was curious, not because I was going to talk about it on here.
Well, like immediately, I was like, how is it offered? Is it on a silver platter? Is there a sign?
Exactly. I mean, is it just the instant gratification and it doesn't want a shot? Like maybe it's the one where it doesn't have to get a shot.
Is it hitting up its little arm like right here?
Exactly.
And then does the needle ever get stuck and it's running around the little maze with a little needle sticking out of its arm?
Running really fast.
Oh, God. That's fascinating.
So I don't understand, but I can only assume that the scientists figured out a way around our challenges with that. So
we'll trust
super addictive and make you crave more sweet and sugary foods and gives you a higher risk of glucose intolerance and all sorts of other things, and gut bacteria, increased fat storage, which nobody needs. So artificial sweeteners, I'm pleased to say I don't use a lot of it. I think that the ones that are based in, so people like stevia. So we're about to hear a lot of the skinny, from Vicki. She's our resident registered dietitian nutritionist. Say that 5 times fast.
And wait for it. She's really sweet.
Oh.
She is.
So Vicki, there's all kinds of artificial sweeteners, and it seems like every time I turn around, there's a new one that I haven't even heard of, and they're supposed to be natural and good for you and all that. Can you help us break down what, and I'm not even going to say, so let's broaden it to not just artificial, but non-sugar. So monk fruit and things like that. So can you talk about sweetening options and where they fall on the spectrum of health?
Sure. Yeah. And that's a great question because, many people are trying to cut their added sugar and sugar in general out of their diet. So it is important to think about what are your options. You've got things like malitol, sorbitol, xylitol. Those are polyols. Those are sugar alcohols. So those actually are, when you see those on a label, they're non-nutritive sweeteners. So they don't contain any nutritional value, basically 0 calories, and they offer a sweet flavor to, many foods. So from sodas, from sodas to gums to candy. So there is benefit for these only because for people that do enjoy, sugary flavors or sweetened foods, they can get that without having those additional calories and actually seeing their blood sugar levels spike. So someone with diabetes or has, weight management concerns, that's something they want to think about. The thing about sugar alcohols are they are the kind of a fermentable carbohydrate as far as when you take them in, your body and intestines have to ferment this sugar alcohol. And that leads to many GI issues for some people. So gas, distension, bloating. You will see that in people that do consume these sugar alcohols. So it's those sugars that have that OL at the end, xylitol, malitol, sorbitol, those have sugar alcohol. So they, for people that have IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, they may think about going on a temporary low FODMAP diet, and these sugar alcohols are not included in that plan because they are high in these fermentable carbohydrates.
Are they bad for you in any other way? Are they harmful?
No. There's been no research to say scientifically that they are dangerous to consume. They're generally recognized as safe. So you may see on a label or in the literature, they're generally recognized as safe. So it's not a problem if you're eating them in small amounts.
Great.
Yes. And then you've got the other artificial sweeteners or, they're also non-nutritive. They don't provide a lot of nutritional value, like aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, stevia, which comes from a plant, but they do process stevia into, these artificial sweetener compounds like Truvia, Purvia. So the thing about these is from a calorie control standpoint, they all have benefit. They're low calorie, if any calorie. They're low carb. You're going to not see blood sugar levels spike with any of these artificial sweeteners. But you know what they do contain can do in the body. You know, much of the research you may have seen on saccharin many years ago, probably 30 or 40, if not more, years ago. Saccharin was shown to cause, like, you know, cancerous tumors in rats. They did a lot of research on rats with saccharin specifically. And that's the one I tell people, you probably don't want to be over consuming saccharin, which is in Sweet and Low. Saccharin's in Sweet and Low. So that one, I tend to tell people, you err on the side of caution with that one. And you don't see that in many products anymore. You know, you typically see it in the sugar, the pink packets with coffee or something like that. But, you know, aspartame, sucralose, those two are, you know, chemically manipulated compounds that are very sweet. You know, sucralose is like 600 times sweeter than sugar.
Oh, my God.
You know, you only need a tiny amount. That's why it's very effective. It's very sweet. The thing about that, too, is that it's chlorinated. So they use chloride in that molecule. We don't know how much that does in the body. Aspartame, they say, is broken down into formaldehyde, which is used in the, you know, the bombing process for bodies. You know, some of this stuff, you know, how much do we want to be taking in? Now,
I'm thinking after this conversation, Vicki, not a whole lot. I'm literally like, my mouth is open listening to this. I'm like, my God.
But, you know, it's not to say that these products eaten in small amounts, you know, these sweeteners, a little bit in your coffee, a little over your oatmeal and your cereal, is going to cause any real damage from a health standpoint. But, you know, honestly, these are chemicals. We don't know what they're doing in the body over time. But, you know, your body does break it down, you know, daily. So if you're consuming small amounts, not a problem. I wouldn't be consuming too much throughout the day in your beverages, in your cereal, in your yogurt. Think about how much you're taking in throughout the day and try to minimize your exposure to it. That's what I like to tell people.
Yeah. Moderation and minimization, it sounds like, two key words.
Yes. And I like to actually tell people to sweeten foods yourself with, you know, all fruit spreads or add berries to oatmeal versus using the artificial sweeteners. Use fruit to sweeten foods. You know, use the natural sugar we've got in the planet world or the plant world to sweeten your foods.
What are your thoughts on monk fruit sweetener?
Monk fruit, once again, that's nectarous, right? That is inherently from the monk fruit, but once again, they do add sugar alcohols to that. You know, it's not, you know, 100% the fruit. It's definitely processed with sugar alcohols. So it's something to think about from how your body tolerates those sugar alcohols. Because like I said, it does cause discomfort for many people when they're eating those foods and they have no idea why. You know, they'll come and see me and say, you know, I'm bloated, I have gas, I'm distended. They don't know why. And I look at their diet and they are eating these, you know, non-nutritive sweeteners, these sugar substitutes, and it might be too much for their system. And everyone tolerates it a little bit differently. So it's something to think about. So once again, sweeten your foods naturally. Use fruit, use frozen fruit. I use all fruit spreads. Like I'll use, you know, those all fruit spreads to put in my oatmeal or add it to yogurt. Because this way you're not getting in those chemicals that you don't know what they're doing in your body.
What are your thoughts on maple syrup, molasses, coconut sugar, and agave?
Excellent question. 'Cause those are not zero calorie, which is good. I'm not saying
right as sweeteners, broadening the topic.
Yeah. Right. So those actually. So when you think about, you know, honey is obviously from a bee. It's a natural source of sugar. It contains antioxidants. So honey does have antioxidant properties, and they say prebiotic properties too. Uh-huh. So it helps the good bacteria in the gut. So the darker the honey, they say the better from a nutritional or mineral-rich standpoint. So honey does have value from a nourishing standpoint, but it's calories you want to think about. It's, there's 15 calories in a teaspoon of all of these products. So it's not much. It's not like you're getting that much, but you want to pay attention to your labels, because when we look at added sugar, now, and I'll answer your question about the others,
Mm-hmm.
when we look at added sugar, there's 4 grams in 1 teaspoon of sugar. So when you look at a label, if it says 16 grams of sugar, that's 4 teaspoons in that serving. So really you want to pay attention. How much sugar am I really taking in? The American Heart Association recommends men get no more than 9 teaspoons of added sugar. Women no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day. So you want to kind of pay attention. Right, exactly. Because, we're different body types and structures. So, so you want to think about how much sugar you are taking in overall. Now, sugar does affect glucose levels the same, whether it's honey, molasses, agave nectar, granulated sugar. It's still going to elevate your glucose levels. And you want to think about that if you are someone that has blood sugar control issues, whether it's type 2 diabetes, you've got type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, or you just have issues regulating blood sugar in general.
Great. And coconut sugar is in the same category as all that other stuff?
Yeah, coconut sugar is, from the coconut, does come from the coconut. They do some processing of it, but it does have a similar profile as far as the other sugars go.
Great. Have you heard of something called Yacon syrup? Yacon?
Yacon. You know what? I don't know much about it. I have heard of it, but it's probably from that plant, the Yacon plant.
It is. Yeah. And it's supposedly a rich source of the prebiotic fiber fructooligosaccharides, FOS.
Yes, and that's one of the ones I was talking about when we think about FODMAPs. Those are those fermentable carbohydrates.
Yeah, like the alcohol ones, huh?
Yes,
yeah.
So for alcohols. That, because it's from a plant, may affect people a little bit differently. The glycemic index may be a little lower on that. So the thing I didn't mention, like with agave nectar, that glycemic index is a bit lower, meaning it doesn't elevate glucose the same way that table sugar would. So it's a little lower in the glycemic index, which is why some people go for agave nectar.
Okay.
So
Great.
Yes. So it's something to think about. But, a lot of these, artificial sweeteners or sugar substitutes do have a place for people that need blood sugar control and do still want to bake and eat foods that do have a sweet flavor. So it's something to think about in moderation. Once again, like I said, minimizing and using moderation is the key.
Brilliant.
From your lips to hopefully my belly, Vicki.
All right. Thank you so much, Vicki.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, Vicki, how can people find out about you? How can they find out about your services, your podcast, your newsletter, all of which are great?
Great. Yes. Just go to my website, victoriashanta-retelny.com. I do have a weekly newsletter I send out. You can sign up on my website. My blog is right on the website too. It's called Simple Cravings, Real Food. And my podcast is called Nourishing Notes. And that is an Anchor podcast. If you go to anchor.fm and put in Nourishing Notes, you will find my podcast. It's just a 2-minute podcast that I do. It kind of gives people the down and dirty about nutrition topics.
Oh, how cool.
Love it. It's super sweet.
I haven't heard it yet. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And you guys, we love Vicki. She's the person we've had on the podcast the most because she's super down to earth. We like her. She's super practical is another reason we like her. So definitely check her out and check out her website and everything she offers.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
for
again.
having me.
Yay.
Thanks, Vicki.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your support. And as always, tell your friends about us, rate and review us when you're done listening to us on your platform of choice.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Have a sweet day.